In the middle of northern China, there's a desert that locals once called the Sea of Death. For centuries, nothing survived there. No crops, no animals, no villages, just an endless ocean of sand, larger than the entire country of Belgium, swallowing everything in its path. Pull up a satellite image of this desert in 2010, and you will see nothing but yellow, mile after mile of empty, baking sand. Pull up the same image today, and your brain will struggle to understand what it is looking at, because now, covering an area so vast capacity in a single year, International Space Station, the entire United States has installed in its entire history, not a lake, not in the last decade, not an illusion, in its solar panels, millions of them, stretching from horizon to horizon, turning one of the most hostile landscapes on Earth into the single largest clean energy installation ever built by any civilization in human history. And here's the part nobody is talking about. What China quietly built in that desert is not just a power plant. It is a machine that solved 3 impossible problems at once. Problems every other country on Earth has failed to crack. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the global energy map has already been redrawn. And most of the world has not even noticed. If you are into stories like this, hit subscribe and stay with me. Let's get into it. Here's something most people in the West have never heard of. Roughly 27% of China's total land area is desert, not dry grassland, actual desert. Sand dunes that move, that shift, that creep forward year after year, burying roads, farms, and entire villages under meters of dust. The Kubuqi Desert in Inner Mongolia is one of the worst. It covers more than 18,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of New Jersey. And for most of modern Chinese history, it was growing. Sandstorms born in the Kubuqi swept across northern China, blanketing Beijing in a yellow haze so thick people could not see across the street. Entire communities at the desert's edge were abandoned. Families who had farmed the same land for generations packed up and left because the sand was literally burying their homes. Local officials called it the sand dragon, and nobody had any idea how to stop it. China tried the obvious solution first. They planted trees, millions of them. Some survived. Most did not. The desert was too dry, the wind too relentless. For decades it felt like a losing war. And then someone asked a question that changed everything. What if the desert is not the enemy? What if the desert is actually the answer? Here's what most people do not realize about deserts. They have one resource in almost unlimited supply that the rest of the world is desperately running out of. Direct, unobstructed sunlight. The Kubuqi Desert receives over 3,000 hours of sunshine every year. Compare that to Germany, one of the world's biggest solar producers, which gets only 1,600. The Kubuqi gets nearly double the sunlight, with none of the clouds or winter darkness that cripple solar power in Europe. And sunlight, unlike oil, does not run out. It does not need to be shipped. It is just there, pouring down onto empty sand, completely free. Chinese engineers looked at this and saw something nobody else had seen. The desert was not useless wasteland. It was the largest unused solar collector on the planet. All they had to do was figure out how to catch it. But here's where it gets fascinating. Building a solar farm in a desert sounds easy. Just lay down panels and plug them in, right? It is one of the hardest engineering challenges on Earth. And the reason no other country has ever pulled it off at this scale. There were 3 impossible problems standing in the way. Saudi Arabia gave up. The United States shelved its megaprojects. India's installations cracked under the heat. China did not stop. China did something nobody saw coming. Problem 1, the sand itself. Desert sand is not like beach sand. It is incredibly fine, almost like powder. It scratches solar panels, clogs joints, and a single sandstorm can drop power output by 30% overnight. The solution came from the most unlikely place imaginable: sheep. Chinese engineers planted drought-resistant shrubs between and underneath the rows of solar panels. The roots grip the sand and stop it from blowing. The shrubs attract insects. The insects attract birds. The shaded ground between panels becomes cool enough to grow grass. And then engineers brought in sheep and goats to graze on that grass. The animals keep the vegetation trimmed to the perfect height. Short enough not to shade the panels, thick enough to lock down the sand. The sheep eat for free, the herders earn income, the desert stays stable, and the panels stay clean. This is not a solar farm, this is a completely self-sustaining ecosystem, built on sand that could not support a single blade of grass 10 years ago. Problem 2, the heat. Surface temperatures in the Kubuqi hit 70 degrees Celsius. That is hot enough to fry an egg on the ground without a pan. Standard solar panels lose nearly 20% of their power at that heat, exactly when you need them most. China's answer? Lift every panel 3 meters off the ground on angled steel frames. This lets air circulate underneath, carrying heat away, like opening a window in a hot room. And it creates shade for the shrubs and grass below. Each panel also tilts automatically throughout the day, following the sun's arc with a precision of 0.1 degrees. Morning they face east. Noon, straight up. Evening, they tilt west. This single innovation increases energy capture by 25%. Problem 3, cleaning. Solar panels need water to clean. The nearest reliable water source is 200 kilometers away. Trucking it in would cost more than the electricity generated. So China cleaned the panels with robots. Thousands of small autonomous cleaning robots patrol the solar fields 24 hours a day. Each one runs on its own tiny solar panel, sweeps the dust off with soft rotating brushes, and returns to charging stations when its battery runs low. No water, no humans, no downtime. Now here's what all of this added up to. The Kubuqi installation, combined with the connected Tengger and Badain Jaran Desert solar bases, now has a total installed capacity of over 100 gigawatts. Let me put that in terms that actually mean something. 100 gigawatts is roughly equal to the entire electricity generation capacity of the United Kingdom. Every power plant, every wind farm, every nuclear reactor, every coal station in Britain combined. China built the equivalent in a desert that 15 years ago produced nothing but sandstorms. But the energy is only half the story. What happened to the desert itself is what truly shocked the scientific community. When the first satellite comparison images were released in 2024, researchers around the world thought there had been a processing error. They asked for the raw data, they reran the analysis. They checked the coordinates 3 times. The results were the same every time. Over the past decade, the Kubuqi Desert has shrunk. Vegetation coverage in the regions surrounding the solar installations has increased by over 50%. Areas that were bare sand in 2013 are now covered in green plants, with actual topsoil forming for the first time in recorded history. The shrubs held the sand retained moisture, the moisture grew more plants meant cleaner air meant cleaner panels meant more electricity, a virtuous cycle born entirely from engineering running on nothing but sunlight. Communities that had abandoned the desert's edge are coming back. New roads, schools and clinics have appeared. An entire regional economy that was dying is now growing, powered, literally and figuratively, by the sun. And the sandstorms? Beijing used to suffer 13 major sandstorms per year. By 2024, that number dropped to fewer than 3. For the first time in human history, fighting desertification is not a cost. It is a profitable business. But if you think this story ends with sheep and solar panels, you have not been paying attention. Because the real reason this project matters has nothing to do with China's deserts at all. Here's a number that should keep every energy strategist in Washington awake at night. In 2024, China installed more new solar capacity in a single year than the entire United States has installed in its entire history. Not in the last decade. In its entire history, every solar panel ever placed on an American rooftop, in an American field, on an American building since the 1970s, China matched all of that in 12 months. And it is accelerating. China now manufactures over 80% of the world's solar panels. It controls the majority of the global supply of polysilicon, the raw material every solar panel on Earth is made from. It dominates solar glass, solar-grade aluminum, and the inverters that convert solar electricity into usable power. What does this mean in plain language? If any country on Earth wants to build a solar farm today, including the United States, most of the critical components will come from China. The United States tried to respond. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 committed hundreds of billions of dollars to building domestic solar manufacturing. New factories were announced. Tax credits were offered, political speeches were made, but here's the uncomfortable reality. Building a solar panel factory takes 3 to 5 years. Training the workforce takes another 2. China has been building this infrastructure for over 15 years. The head start is not months, it is a decade and a half. And while America debates trade policies, China is doing something else entirely. It is exporting the model, the Kubuqi blueprint. Panels plus shrubs plus sheep plus robots. It is now being studied and replicated in the Sahara, the Thar Desert in India, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. China is not just selling solar panels anymore, it is selling a complete system for turning dead land into productive energy infrastructure. In the 20th century, the country that controlled oil controlled the world. In the 21st century, the country that controls the technology to harvest unlimited free energy from the sun and can prove it works at scale in the harshest conditions on Earth. That country holds a different kind of power. Right now, only one country has proven it can do this. In a desert that used to be called the Sea of Death, China has announced plans to expand its desert solar capacity to 450 gigawatts by 2030. That would be enough to power Germany, France, the UK, and Italy combined, generated entirely from sunlight hitting sand that used to produce nothing. The next phase integrates massive wind farms and ultra-high voltage transmission lines stretching over 3,000 kilometers from the western deserts to the eastern megacities, carrying clean power across the entire width of China with less than 5% energy loss. 15 years ago, the Kubuqi was a wasteland. 10 years ago, it was an experiment. 5 years ago, it was a proof of concept. Today, it is a blueprint that could reshape how every country on Earth thinks about energy, land, and the deserts that cover 1/3 of our planet. The Sea of Death is not dead anymore. It turns out, it was only sleeping. If this changed the way you think about deserts and energy, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this story is far from over, and we will cover every major update as it happens. Now I want to hear from you. If your country had a massive desert and China offered to turn it into a solar power plant, using this exact system, but China would control the energy output for 30 years, would you take that deal? Yes or no, and tell me why. Drop your answer in the comments below. I will see you in the next one.